Here, in another segment, we have runaway shackles. These were used and put on slaves to know where they were and how they were working. And what they would do was, they would take and open this. Once this was opened, they put it around the leg or whatever it would fit on. Sometimes it fit around the neck to determine how small it was. Then it would be locked on. Once it's locked on, it happens that you'd walk around and it would make this noise. The dogs in turn would hear the stones on the inside or the little seeds that were on the inside, and they would finally track the slave that was running with this. This was a runaway shackle. In turn, the slaves would in their running, they would fill it with mud. When it would try to fill it with mud, it would fix it so the beads wouldn't move around. But after it dried out and turned to dust, they would begin to move around again, and the dog could track it clearly. Another restraint we have here. This particular thing is called a yoke. A limb was cut, it was cleaned, primarily to keep slaves together. What it would do, like this, goes around the neck. When it goes around the neck, around here, wire would be put, so you couldn't get your head out. This was also used as a means of execution. To execute a slave because he was trying to run away, this thing would be used to put the head of a slave here and then smash his head. That's what these things were used for. It's made of wood. It's just a regular branch, but this has been used over the years, and it was sent to us from Africa by one of the chiefs. We're looking at shackles again. We're looking at another kind of restraint and forms of punishment needed out to people and slaves in the Southlands. This particular piece was made by a slave for a slave. And if you can notice, on the inside there's leather. That was so that you would not damage your product or damage the thing that you were using. This particular thing was made for a slave that just came on the farm. It was put on like this. He was shackled in. Once it was on, if he moved, this ball you carried wherever you went. Also, he had another piece of apparatus that he wore around his neck. While this was on, he wore these at the same time. This is a 5 to 6 pound weight. Where the concept of iron balls came from, this is where it would come from. What it would do, it would hit him wherever it needed to in the privates to keep him from running away. This was another way of restraining a people that did not read restraining. They captured people out of their own lands, brought to America, and put in slavery. Again, we have a ball and chain. This is made of pure iron. What it is, it weighs about 50 pounds. This particular item was dug up in a sugar mill. If you notice, this piece is broken off or either cut. Someone either tried to get out of it or they broke their way out of it. But here it is. These are the particular kinds of things they used. Again, we have another restraint here. This particular one came from Africa. This goes around the neck, also around the hands. Around the hands and the neck. This is how it was worn. When it was worn like this, remember that the sharpness of the iron or the metal itself would always cut into the person's neck or the one or the wearer of this particular apparatus. So they were not careful. They were not careful with whoever they had it on. But one thing about it, the marks around your neck would show, because these heavy items leaning on the collarbones also cut into the collarbones. Again, forms of punishment. This particular one, again, would be put on a slave and hooked to a ball. Only the ball would be bigger. The ball would be 100 pounds. And it would fix it so that the person could not move all night. They usually lock them under the house to fix it so they trained them like dogs so they wouldn't run away at night. Also we have here, we have this particular one. This is a chain that was used to bring the slaves from the market. Or slave catchers would catch this. They would hook this around the slave's neck, then hook them to either the back of a horse or the wagon, whichever came first. If the slave catchers would catch you and put this around your neck, they would drag you behind a horse. You would have to hold this. You would have to hold this. In the event that you fell down, remember you could lose your head. So what you would do was hold on to this tightly. Once you got back to the plantation, you'd be beaten, ears cut off, and things like that. You in turn would become a piece of meat to have things sold to teach other slaves not to try to run away.
Whippings were very commonplace. So much so that they actually passed a law that forbid a slave owner from whipping a slave more than 100 times. These whips here are examples of the kind of whips that were used on the plantations. This is a rawhide whip. And while this looks very flexible, they would soak the ends of these tails, as they are called, in brine or salt water. And they would become so hard, they would be like a razor's edge. And when they slashed through the slave's naked back, it would leave these huge marks that these slaves would carry for the rest of their lives. This is a cane that would be used the same way, and when whacked across a slave's back or face or any part of his body would also leave horrible marks. Women weren't left out of this either. A well-to-do white mistress would get gifts at Christmas time or for her birthday, similar to this item here, a comb and brush set that she would have in her boudoir with a nice mirror. But I bet you never saw this. This is considered a white mistress's hand whip. She would be given this as a gift. It would be highly polished and have her initials or her name monogrammed on it, attached to a heavy strap. While this strap may look harmless, it's pretty thick, similar to a belt. And trust me, it offers quite a sting.
Over the years, I've been collecting artifacts. As a matter of fact, I've been collecting little pencils like this. I've seen alligators on jars. I've seen alligator ashtrays, and I've seen them depicted with kids in it. And I was wondering why the children would be there. As a matter of fact, this particular pencil sharpener, this is a pencil sharpener or a pencil holder with a black head of a baby sitting out of its mouth. I didn't pay any attention. I have been collecting for quite a few years, and I have the posters and things like that about different things. And then one day I was down in Florida. I'd gone down with my wife, and I took a trip for myself off to the Wild Blue Yonder, going out to hunt artifacts. And in my quest to hunt artifacts, I came upon a pawn shop in Sanford, Florida. In the pawn shop was a gentleman who owned it. They went and got him and told him I was there and I wanted to buy some of the shackles he had hanging around the walls. I asked him, could I buy them? He said no. He didn't want to sell anything. He just wanted me to see it. Then we began to talk. And I asked him, I said, look, please let me buy something. I got to take something from here. He says, no. He says, I don't want to sell anything. He said, but I'm going to the back and I'll sit down. Meanwhile, he came out. And came back out and he began to talk to me. He said, he said, you probably don't know this. He said, but years ago, he said, my grandfather before he died, told me of the things they would do. He said he would go down. He said his grandfather said they would go down and they would take babies with them. I said, what do you mean babies? He says, well, let me tell you. He said the